Hello class! In this video tutorial we are going to create our very first pivot table. This is the culminating moment where all that you knew and have learned about data collection, analysis, and reporting will come together. So you have to ask yourself, what is a pivot table? Well, a pivot table simply is an easy way to summarize any bit of data that you have in your spreadsheet. It gives you complete 100% flexibility in choosing any particular columns that you're interested in, but also being able to filter out and select the values within those columns so that you can create a customized tabular display of your data. And that's pretty much it. It's a table just like a spreadsheet is a table. It consists of rows and columns. So to get you started, I kind of developed some short little pointers or tips in the example data file, and I have them listed here in this spreadsheet. And it'll say right here, pivot table and pivot chart tips. Some things for you to consider before you get started. And one of the things you should do is just take a moment and think. What is it that you're interested in analyzing? And going back to session 1 and the Park article, one of the most important concepts is having a set of questions, or it can be a very simple broad question. That's what's going to lead your analysis, and it more or less follows that spectrum of deductive to inductive logic, where you can start with a very broad general question that will lead you down the path to a more specific set of questions. You really want to keep things easy, both visually and as well as in terms of interpreting your table or chart. And one thing that I like to do anytime someone asks me to do an analysis, I actually like to sit down with a piece of paper and draw it out. So here's kind of an example. It's a little crude, but this is something actually I do, and I would recommend it so you can just get kind of a visual of where you think your summary pivot table should lead you. So for this particular example, I know I had kind of a general question of what does the fall local reading assessment for performance look like? So I had to think about, okay, well, I know I have my performance level groups. I created those. However, it'd probably be helpful for me to disaggregate that by grade level so I can look for trends and patterns within the school. So this leads me to another tip, is to think about the structure of the table. Mainly, what do you think would be good for rows and columns? And I refer to this as the real estate of your pivot table or spreadsheet, because a lot of times, depending on what you have you picked out, you may have more values for one particular data element than another. So like for instance, in this example that we're going to do in the example data file, it's a unit school, so there's more grade levels, so we have K to 12 in there, than the 4 performance level groups. So it makes sense to have more information going down vertically on the screen or page than horizontally across. If we move to our actual data file, if we're interested in our performance on this fall local reading assessment, particularly the performance level groups, we're actually ready to dig right into our first pivot table. And one thing I always do is make sure I don't really have any data selected before I make a pivot table. I just kind of click in the first cell in A1. Then you got to make sure you're in the Insert ribbon, not Home, not Page Layout, not Data, Insert. and simply scroll over to the left here, and you'll see in the corner it says pivot table. If you click the little arrow there, it'll say pivot table and pivot chart. We're focusing in on the pivot table. And when you click that, you'll get this little box that asks you create the pivot table. And one thing you'll notice, it's asking for the data range. What data do you want to analyze? And one thing I found, anytime I usually click that first cell A1, Excel automatically knows what data I'm interested in the particular worksheet, and it selects it all for me. The next thing it's asking you is, where do you want to put it? Well, you don't want to put it in the existing worksheet because that's your data file. Always keep it on new worksheet. So what that'll do, it'll create a new tab down on the bottom here. So you just click OK. Then you'll get this screen. This is the new worksheet, and you'll see it being numbered here, sheet 1 or whatever number it is that you're on. You'll see this little picture here, but then you'll see you're on the right side of the screen. This is where all the good stuff happens. This is your pivot table field list. And if you look down here, this is all the columns in your data file. And this is just as simple as just checking the box. So our particular question we were interested in, how is the performance on our fall local reading assessment, particularly the performance level? So we know that that's this particular column. It's the fall local reading assessment performance level. So we can check that box. And when you check it, lo and behold, look what happened in your table. There are my 4 performance level groups. Now, if you recall from the previous screencast on creating these performance level groups, we had numbered them, and this is the reason why. Because now we have basically our scale, our spectrum of the 4 performance level groups. By virtue of numbering them, we have them in the order that we want them. So they're listed here as below, partial, at, and above. And if we didn't put in those numbers, like I said, it would be listed as below, above, at, and partial. So that little trick saves us a lot of time, energy, and frustration. So okay, so that we actually now need some numbers in here. Particularly, we want to know how many kids are in each of these performance level groups. So we're going to left click on that fall local reading performance level variable, and we're going to drop it in this right corner here where it says values. And one thing I want you to pay particular attention to is this lower corner is our rows, this upper corner is our columns. This kind of corresponds to the drawing I was thinking of. So eventually we're going to want to switch our columns and rows so that we have grade levels going down this way and performance levels going across the top. Right now we have our performance levels as going down the left side of the table, and we're going to want to change that. But initially, by dragging and dropping, you'll see what we have here is a count of each of the 4 performance level groups. That's helpful to some degree. But we want to go and add our grade level in. So we're going to check the box there. And look what happened. It added it in as a set of rows. Okay, somewhat helpful, but we want to be able to kind of replicate my drawing. So we're going to move our performance levels to make them columns. So now what you see across the top here is our below, partial, at, and above. And here's the count within each grade level. And you'll also notice that kindergarten is down at the bottom here because we have a combination of alpha and numeric data in that grade level variable. So we're almost where we need to be. The raw counts are helpful, but what we're really interested in is a percentage. So this is where things can get a little complicated because we need to change the value of those counts. And that's kind of actually really easy to do if you just left click and go to the value field settings here. Now we definitely want to summarize by the count. That's good. But we want to express it as a percentage. So essentially what we want to do is know what kind of data we weren't interested in terms of rows or columns. In this particular example, if you click the Show Values drop-down menu here, we've got a whole bunch of things you can pick. We're going to be interested in what percentage of kids are scoring at each of the 4 performance level groups within each grade level. So the rows are a grade level, so we want percent of row, and we're going to click OK. So, lo and behold, there are our percentages. Now, with the pivot table, essentially it's done. You can format this any way you want in terms of appearance. So if you wanted to center this, you can do that. If you want to round these percentages, you can format the cells, get rid of them. But here, we have all the information that we're interested in. It looks very similar to my drawing. Now, you'll notice all my pivot table options have disappeared. All you have to do is click anywhere in the table, and this stuff will reappear. Now, one thing you should pay attention to in the pivot table list, for anything you check, or hover over for that matter, there's a little upside down triangle here. This is where you can get creative or specific and filter out specific values within your data elements. So for example, let's just say I don't want kindergarten in there. I uncheck it, click OK, and it's gone. If I want to get it back, I just go back, scroll down, check the box, and there it is. So essentially, that's a pivot table. Very easy to do, enables you to take any large summary of raw data that you have in your data collection file and gives you the ability to instantly summarize and analyze it. In the next tutorial, we're going to go into pivot charts. And so just one thing you should know, a pivot chart really is no different. You're going to go through the same motions here that you will do for a pivot table, because the pivot chart is just a graphical, visual re-representation of the pivot table. And I have a lot of that information here listed in the tips. So, have at it.